Welcome back to Dialogue, and welcome back as well. With me in the studio we have Cecilia Lindquist, a Swedish sinologist and the author of two beautiful books about China, The Kingdom of Chinese Characters and also guqin. And of course today we're going to focus on your book about guqin, this musical instrument from China. You talk about protect the culture such as guqin. There's another difficulty which has to do with the technical details. As you may know, guqin never really had in history a written down scripts or music scripts just as the Western music do. It is mainly about how you put your hands, it's notes about that, how you move your hand, but it's really not about exactly how you do that if you do not have a teacher.
You have to have a teacher, that's right. And that's essential.
You don't know the rhythm.
No. Well, sometimes you can, from the scores, you can see this has to be played in a more rapid way, but not like we have in the West.
There's no set style.
Not set style. That also makes it so flexible. You can play. I mean, if you listen to people in Sichuan playing guqin, they play it quite different from what they do here.
What you've been saying really reminds me of a way of looking at things these days in China when it comes to protecting the culture. You know, even when it comes to guqin, just a few years ago, one piece of guqin, the music instrument itself, coming from the Ming Dynasty, was being auctioned.
I know.
And it's more than 20 million RMB.
Yes.
And of course, on the one hand, people argue that's a good sign because now people begin to treasure what our traditional culture is all about. On the other hand, the other people argue differently. They say everything in China has become a commercial commodity, including a sacred instrument like guqin. How do you see that?
Unavoidable, I think, unavoidable. But also there are many excellent qin masters now who make qin, very good quality qins all over the country. And although the price is just now very high, there are people who can afford it. So the knowledge of how to make a really good qin can be survive for the future.
There's an interesting phenomenon that some has pointed out in China, that the part of Chinese culture that need to be protected and cherished probably will not be realized until people from outside China became interested in them. And they point to the examples of Peking opera, they point to the examples of calligraphy, they even point to the examples of contemporary Chinese art. It was very popular outside China first, and then it kind of turned back into the domestic market. But how do you see that phenomenon? That you have to have others to identify your culture, and therefore you know how to cherish it.
To a certain kind of culture, it becomes so natural for you. You don't really know how important it really is. But if other people coming from abroad and saying, your culture is wonderful, we love your music, then they can realize, yes, it is really. We don't have to be shy to say that. It is beautiful. And so if people from abroad coming, writing a book about the guqin or making the performances of Peking opera, I see that as a way of between the cultures to help each other.
So is this a wake-up call?
I never thought of it when I was writing it, but I hope maybe it could be.
To me it is interesting that in a way guqin confirms people's idea about China from outside China, which is exotic, which is ancient, which is beautiful and romantic.
There is this tendency,
and of course your life as a sinologist has a lot to do with that part of China, to look at China's culture, look at China's history, look at China's guqin, but yet you come to this country so often. So how do you try to bring the reality and the studies you've been doing, almost totally of two different worlds, together?
Through these first 2 years, when I was studying at the Research Institute for Guqin, I got to know so many people, and I could I got to understand a little bit of what Chinese culture was. So every time when I came back, I get astonished. Whole parts of the Beijing is gone, and the high-rising buildings is coming. And I still sometimes have the old pictures of what it looked like. But I still have my old friends, and I discuss with them, I meet with them regularly, and without them it would be much more difficult, I think.
How do you think their lives are being changed? Are they being marginalized?
I think most of them are extremely happy with what has happened, that China is now regaining its place in the world, that there are so many people, 400 million people, who are not starving any longer, and so on. So the main foundation for people's life has been risen, and they appreciate that very much. Most of my friends are, of course, intellectuals, and they have been in the Academy of Science and teaching in different universities and so on. So, of course, they are belong to a certain special class, they do. But they have been very loyal to what has happened.
Well, it seems that over the years you've been keeping in touch with your Chinese friends and, of course, your Chinese teacher.
Yes, very much my Chinese teacher, Wang Di. And I saw her last time in 2005, just 4 days before she left this world. I had then come to China almost every year with long lists of questions I wanted to ask her, because so much of the material on guqin is written in classical Chinese, and that is very difficult to understand. And so she explained to me. And so when I came here in 2005, I telephoned to her, and her husband answered and began to cry. And then he said, "I can't talk to you about this." And I found she was in hospital, dying. And I asked if I might maybe meet her. And they said, no, nobody is allowed to see her, and nobody is allowed to know that she is dying. 5 minutes later, her daughter phoned me and said, "Of course you can come." And so I was staying there for 2 hours, and I had all my questions. I knew she was going to leave this world. It was a very, very touching meeting. Her last question to me was, "Do you have everything you need for your book now?" And I said, "Yes, I think so. There's only one thing, and that is, I have got no photos of the time when I was your student. Do you have any?" She nodded her head and called her daughter, and some few days later I received a lot of photos showing both all the people working in the institute, and with the small person, Tafu Xi and Pu Xuezhai and Guan Pinghu, and my teacher standing here. And also when she was working with Guan Pinghu, and on their Sunday concerts, when they all met in the institute and they played together, made reconstructions of old Qin melodies, and they were playing also in the garden. And she also gave me some photos of me when she was instructing me, and a beautiful picture of Guan Pinghu, and a picture for my examination when I was playing for all the teachers and the Qin players of Beijing, and I had never seen that. So 4 days before she left this world, she gave these pictures to me.
So every time when you look at these pictures, you think about her.
Last meeting with her.
When you talk about China, you write a book which is called guqin. You write a book about the kingdom of ancient Chinese characters. When the U.S. President Barack Obama came to China, he didn't visit any modern places at all. He visited the Great Wall and the Forbidden City, both of which are ancient. Do you think China now have anything that is modern and that Chinese can be proud of when it comes to its culture?
When I came back in September this year, I was here September 3 weeks, and now also 3 weeks. My friends immediately took me to the Olympic place and said, "Have you seen these wonderful buildings? And have you seen this and that?" And they took me to all these places. They were so extremely happy and proud of them. And I think they are great achievements. And there are many other things that we could that are not exotic, not romantic, but are just token of what has happened in China.
There are a lot of debates going on in China as to what really represents the country. The traditional culture, which the outside world certainly is fascinated about, or the modern development, or rather a mixture of it, or something else, something more spiritual, or something more materialistic.
In the West, I mean, it took many years before we had risen our standard of living in a way that people could start to enjoy culture. When they didn't starve any longer, they could start building houses that were better quality. They could buy a first car. They could send their children to university and so on. But when you come to a certain level, then you are longing for something else. And in the West, many people, they turn to religion or to New Age or something like that, or they tend to this turn to work out and so on, taking part in marathon running and so on. And so people tend to find something more when the quality of their life have not reached a certain standard. Then you are looking further, and I think for many Chinese it's the same thing. Their standard has risen so very much. Now they are looking for something more.
One of the of guqin is to make you think about another world, which is to make you feel tranquility and also make you have more wisdom to peace, more wisdom to a more beautiful world. On the other hand, it is also an escape for many of the tired officials, for example, or generals in the ancient China, for them to escape the reality once they are not being favored by the system anymore.
Yes, but also, I mean, all these officials that were sent out to govern a province or whatever it was, they were good Confucians in daytime. They did everything they had to do. They recruited soldiers, they collected the taxes and introduced new material, and they checked the water system and so on. So they were good Confucians in daytime. But in the evening they turned Taoists, wanted to get in contact with nature, with the flowers, with their inner heart, and with the stones, with everything that is one of the 10,000 things. They wanted to belong to this nature and to that world. So there is always this dualism. You are a very efficient official in daytime, and you are a dreamer at night.
Do you see many Chinese are like that?
I think most people are, even in Sweden.
And do you think guqin will once again play that function in the Chinese society?
I already see it. And definitely in other places also, like Taiwan, Singapore, and so on, and the United States.
Cecilia Lindquist, thank you so much, and thank you for writing that beautiful book about one important part of Chinese culture, the Qin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.